Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Equalizer season finale. Great season finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, nothing good could ever last, because obviously Vi and Delilah are out having, they were going to go to, the movies, and Delilah's getting her, Vi to listen to more modern music, and you have, Robin working on her dad's, car, but the good times don't last. They immediately turn sour in both situations, because let's start off with Vi and Delilah really quickly. They are dealing with quite a few hostage situations kind of popped up recently. Obviously, a little earlier in the season, there was a couple episodes back, there was a hospital hostage situation, but now it's like this. But a guy is about to rob the place, and Delilah clocked it because a lot of that training she did with her mom, especially more recently, especially last episode, wasn't it? Yeah, the self-awareness stuff. Really. Well, that might not have been this episode. It was episode before last. It was episode 16. She was doing the self-awareness stuff. But either way, Delilah clocked, okay, this place is about to get robbed. Aunt Vi, we need to get out of here. But before they could, the guy starts robbing the place. And this is one of those situations. It does happen in life, and I think it's a good aspect of life, of just that human connection of. Vi tries to talk to the guy. That's happened before. I remember when I was living in Georgia, I don't remember the details of it, but I remember there was a guy that was because I was in elementary school at the time this went down, but there was a guy that was kind of loose. I forgot what his circumstances were, but he was kind of holding a woman hostage, and she talked him down into turning himself in. So, it happens, but I remember that story specifically because I was living in Georgia at the time. It was a pretty, big story at the time. Once again, I can't tell you the full details because this was, at that point, it might have been, 19, 20 years ago at that point, because I was in the 6th grade at the time or something like that. So it's been that long, so I don't remember the details of it. But it's kind of that similar thing where Vi talks to him like a human. It's hey, let me know about you. Oh, your name is Drake. You helped build some of the bridges, and he's in construction and stuff. But because so much stuff is getting automated nowadays, he lost his job and he ended up losing his pension. And just it's that sad aspect of when life just hits you hard. That's the sad thing of when life hits you, it hits boom, boom, boom. It can when it rains, it pours. Obviously, no getting into specifics, but life has kind of happened recently with my family where it's one thing after another. And so it's just just one unfortunate thing led to another. His wife ended up leaving him, which even he's hey, I don't blame her. I've just not been in the right place. I've been pretty bad off. And Vi immediately picked up some of the signs of right, the stuff that he's wearing, the stuff he ended up trying to steal is this is stuff from someone who's homeless. And she's I'm not here to judge you. It's just the fact is the hardships of life. I get it. And she's trying to get to know him. It's hi, my name's Vi. You're Drake. Drake, you should answer. They were trying to convince him to answer the phone because the cops are going to negotiate. Because if you don't, they're going to come in here and they might kill you. And it's just. Even Drake was talking to Delilah because Delilah's please sir, don't, they'll come in here, they'll shoot you. And he's well, maybe that's the best course, because for him, he's kind of given up. He doesn't think there is any other solution. And Vi talked to him about right. She talked about her struggles where it's just life fell apart, that eviction notice comes in, you're trying to live paycheck to paycheck and nothing works out. And she talks about, because I don't think it's ever really come up about their living situation, I don't even know if Delilah knew, because in that moment it's almost whoa. I guess she never knew how hard it was for her, for Vi before she came living with them. But it's I had to move in with my niece and help her raise her great daughter. And it's just I know what it's like, but the fact of the matter is that gave me the time that I was able to turn my life around. It's not saying it's going to be easy, but I started painting my life depended on it, and look at where I am right now. I am teaching kids art. And my life did a complete 180, and yours can too, but he's kind of given up. But she's you don't know. None of us know what our lives could easily be, but if you stick around long enough, if you just kind of it's not the easiest thing. I'm not saying it's going to be good, but I believe that you can turn things around. And during like before, just when the police were about to bust in, Delilah notices the gun isn't loaded, and I thought it was actually like a beautiful human moment where she like dropped, like she spin kicks him, knocks his feet from underneath him, and she gets on top of him like, please don't shoot him, the gun is empty, the gun is empty. I was like, that's such a beautiful moment of like, he doesn't have to die, this man is struggling. It's not like he's not a bad person, he's a person who's just in a rough spot, and he was so desperate, you know, and that's the sad thing. Like, it's not like he's the only one that's in it. So there's so many people. Like, I'm not saying it justifies it, but it is that human thing of understanding, being sympathetic, and even in Vi's case, empathetic, of knowing what it's like to be in that rough spot. And but Delilah saved that guy's life, because if she didn't do what she did, the cops were going to kill him. And like, she's just like, please, and because she was on top of him too, being like, please don't shoot him, please don't shoot him, the gun is empty, the gun is empty. It's like, dude, that could have easily gone a different way. And so, but Vi's like, I meant every word I ever said to you. And he kind of nods to her and Delilah, because it's like they saved his life. And I do believe we could see that come back in a future episode of like, he got a second chance because of that. Like, yeah, he robbed the place and he's going to probably most likely get some jail time, but maybe a good lawyer could like lessen that to some degree. Like, I don't know, like, you know, I don't know the law enough, but maybe they could lessen that a little bit, because no one was actually hurt. So maybe, you know, and you know, so that probably will go a long way to help him. So I just thought that was a powerful element to the episode, but also it's a amalgamation of everything she's learned from her training with Mel and but also her training from her mom about self-awareness. It all came together in that moment, and she was able to utilize it for good, you know? So there's that. On the other side of things, like I said, the good times didn't roll for too long, because both Robin and Mel and Harry ended up getting jumped by some people. Yeah, I love that, like, when Rob's doing her, I mean, even cut between the Rob thing and Mel and Harry, that's just like, of course you're going to play Let the Bodies Hit the Floor. You're like, yeah! Because it's like, yeah, it's the perfect song when Rob is literally dropping bodies. I mean, not in the killing them way, but like, yo, it's actually pretty dope when she grabbed the dude and like bashed him through like those stalls in the bathroom. It's like, yo, I don't know if they fully knew who they were going up against, but there was a syringe. So, because now the $1 million question is like, well, who is this? Is this someone from the past? Especially everything more recently that she was dealing with in episode, was it 16? Or was it? No, it's episode 15 with Home Dude in London and stuff like that. That job, the last Fisk and her situation. Like, that guy, I was like wondering if it had something to do with the guy they ended up arresting, taking down that episode. I was wondering if this has some correlation there, but it's like, yeah, they're not just coming after Robin, they came after Mel and Harry as well. And it turns out that Fisk is there the moment they go in. Colton's sitting there in the seat, love Harry be like, no, get up, get out of my seat, you know? And so it's like, all right, let's kind of like, and he showcases like, right, these people have been following each and every one. It isn't just Robin, and it's not just more recently. I think it has been for a while. They've been keeping tabs on you, probably waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike when your guard's kind of at its lowest type of situation. But they were all kind of like, Mel and Rob picked up immediately, like, are we being tailed? So, but now it is a situation of trying to figure out who they are. So Harry goes off. He ends up meeting up with Dante. Dante's still on his suspension, so they're kind of working together. And it is that thing of, yeah, like, Dante's dedicated himself to a system where it's like, I'm doing my job. So there's great area to that, because it's like, yeah, you are going after a bad guy that no one else feels like they're really doing their job of going after him. And like, this is a guy that he like did a drive-by and shot at man, he could have killed him. Then also you add in that he's putting drugs on the street. It's like, this is a very bad guy that no one's doing anything about. And I was just doing my job and I did nothing wrong. He jumped the building and now I'm being blamed for it. And now I'm being put on suspicion while they like figure this all out. So at least for now, Dante's like, right, I'll help out Harry. I'll be able to do some good with it. I love that. Also love really quickly too, that before Harry left, you had, Fisk be like, oh yeah, you should probably call Dante. And then both Mel and Rob looked at him like, I know you didn't just drop Dante's name. It's like, of course he would know about Dante's because he's keeping tabs on Rob, so he knows everyone. So he probably knows enough about Delilah and Vi, but also to throw in like Dante. He's making a point of like, yeah, I know about your life. I know how important that guy is to you. So it's like, shut up, Fisk, you know? So, I mean, it didn't have that, but it had that energy to it. They didn't say it, but you could definitely tell that conversation kind of had that same amount of energy. But either way, Mel and Rob went to meet the guy who most likely synthesized the thing they were trying to stab her with in the syringe. And I love when Rob stabbed him with it. I'm like, she didn't actually do that because they don't know what's in it, so they wouldn't take the chance of killing you. But it's like, yeah, it's like saline and whiskey, so you're good. And he was panicking, like, oh, here's the antidote. Basically, it's a powerful truth serum, is what they were basically making. So they're trying to get something out of Rob. And so that was, but I love the guy, like, just so relieved, like, oh, thank God. Oh, I thought I was dead, because apparently, like, it affects your nervous system, but the longer it's in your system, eventually it'll burn out your nervous system until your body forgets how to function and you end up dying from it. So, we find out because of Harry and Dante finding a symbol in an area where they tracked the van. This has to deal with some freedom fighters in Venezuela. So this ties back to Rob's CIA days, because they figured, like, right, with all the stuff she's been doing, like with the military, or like the CIA, or all the Equalizer stuff, it's like, who could be coming after us like that? And it's like, yeah, it has ties to the CIA was helping Venezuela fight like a dictatorship at the time, but the CIA pulled them out. I don't know if they ever explained what it was, but the way Mel talks about it is like, yeah, this is what the CIA does. Iran, other places. It's like, right, you're coming here pretending to be allies. You shift stuff up. You get people's hopes up. You kind of side with one side, but you abandon them just because it's like, yeah, it's too much trouble to, like, hey, we're caught up in too much of a thing. We need plausible deniability. We want, because even later on, Fisk is like, oh, they've never acknowledged the Venezuela thing and they never will. So it's that type of thing of like, we need to distance ourselves from this. Like, it comes down to that we gotta, it's in our best interest to help in some regards, but then it's like, yeah, then it becomes, it's too much trouble, so like, let's pull our agents out. Like, there's just too much at risk and too much blowback on the CIA because it's got to protect itself. You know, the agency's own, like, its own, it's self-preservation for the agency. I think it's just what that all kind of gets allocated to. But yeah, but they find out that's what this is all about. And apparently, Rob lost two good friends. She lost Ed and Michelle. But Michelle, that actress, looked so familiar, and I'm like, there's no way they're just putting her in a photo. I think, I could be mistaken, but I believe I recognize the actress. I can't think of her name off the top of my head. Okay, so I looked it up. I also looked at the pronunciation because I didn't want to butcher it, but I'm still going to end up doing it. But I believe it's Ilfinish Hadera is her name. I'm probably butchered her first name, and I'm so sorry. But I recognized her because I was like, at first I thought she was someone else, but then like later on when she pops up, I was like, oh. Like I said, she seemed like too much of a recognizable actress. I confused her with someone else, but then when I found out who she was, I was like, it still made sense. Like, they wouldn't get you just for like a photo. It's like, you're too significant. I was like, at the bare minimum, she's still alive. But so I kind of called that immediately. But the thing I recognize her from, there's a show called Deception. It was a short-lived ABC show. I highly recommend you check it out. I mean, granted, it was canceled after one season. Basically, it was like a crime drama where like the FBI were working with like this magician dude, where they would basically like use like magician trickery to like find out how people committed crimes and even dupe the criminals. It's a whole thing. But she was the lead FBI agent character in that show. She was also in an episode of The Punisher. Funny enough, it's because it was such an interesting character. Because like I forgot the circumstances, but she played basically a dominatrix, I think, if I remember correctly. Because I remember watching The Punisher after I'd seen Deception, be like, hey, that's yeah. So yeah. Either way, I looked into it. I believe it is the same actress. If not, this whole thing's kind of a pointless diatribe. But like I said, I believe it's the same actress. But either way, getting back to my point. We end up finding out from Rob later on too that this mission in Venezuela, it going sideways, was finally what like broke her and was like, I'm not going to like work with the CIA anymore. Even though she has her ties, her ties were always indirect because her main ties were through Bishop, but she kind of got drawn back even more so now because of Fisk. But because apparently Bishop was involved in that operation as well. In fact, he's the one that kind of pulled her out. But yeah, that's what this is all about. And sadly, while that was all going down, Dante and Harry end up going toe to toe with a guy. Like, it took both of them together to take this guy down. Because, well, he's not in a position where he can flash his badge and be like, yo, you want to slow your roll? These guys are coming after him regardless, so probably wouldn't stop even if they knew Dante was a cop. But sadly, they took the guy down, but Dante got like the syringe, and I love that he's talking like, "Hey, Rob, our eyes, you can kind of get lost in them, you can swim in them or whatever." And Rob and Mel are looking at each other, and it's like, "Okay, calm down, Romeo." And even later on, he's just like, "Yeah, Rob taught me a different type of way when it comes to justice, that it's not so black and white." Which, yeah, because he was very like, "Hey, there's good, there's bad." Obviously, that's why him and Rob were on such conflicted terms, especially in season 1. But obviously, like, he's, especially after talking to his dad, he recognizes the gray of it all. Especially after, was it episode 13 of last season? What was it? I think it was episode 13, the DWB episode, where he went down with that whole situation with those cops, that whole thing. So that all like changed his view on a lot of stuff. So he has a very different perspective, and he's like, "That's one of the things I love about her." And it's like, hey, and then like Rob's like, "Did he just say that?" Mel's like, "I don't know." And Harry be like, "Yeah, ignore him. That was just the radio. Okay, we're about to go." I was like, I love that. That's actually super sweet. I was like, I love him tripping balls and saying all the stuff about how he feels about Rob. It's like, oh, because she doesn't know where they currently stand. So that was kind of a nice little touch. He probably won't remember that, and Rob will probably bring it up and kind of like rub it in his face a little, but we'll see. But obviously, they met with Fisk and found out that this is what this is all about, but he can't get backing from the CIA. They're fully after Fisk, but Mel and specifically Rob got tied up in all of this because of her connection to Fisk, and Harry and Mel got caught up in this because of their connection to Rob. So they were going to leave Fisk to fend for himself, but he got grabbed. And it's almost like, yeah, he didn't fight back or whatever. Like, maybe he planned this because he knew he wanted to force my hand because he knew I would save him. It's like, love him or hate him, Fisk doesn't deserve to kind of get got the way he's about to do. And I even love Mel being like, "Man, you're too good for Fisk." So sadly, they get grabbed when they track them down, and while Fisk is getting tortured by Enrique, he was the leader of the Freedom Fighters, because things went super sideways after the CIA bailed. All the Freedom Fighters, including Enrique, like, they lost a lot of good people, and those people had friends and family murdered and executed. Now, you have to specify, because like execution is like, obviously, because they were dealing with a dictator who was like, "Oh, you try to come for me? Yeah, I got you." So they have all the right to be pissed at Fisk. Fisk keeps up the tense of like, "Hey, I had nothing to do with that. That wasn't my call. That was a higher up decision." But for him, it's like, Enrique takes this personal, because it's like, you were like my friend. You had me trusting you and believing you, and you threw us to the wolves, essentially. And then we find out for Rob, which I love the whole her and Mel situation, where Mel was like, after they knocked the guy out, Mel went to get like the knife off of him or whatever. And I love Rob being like, have you done this before or something? Because it seems like you got too much experience here. Sadly, their escape didn't go without a hitch, and they ended up getting captured again. And Mel and Harry and Dante went to try and find the cure, the antidote for the injection, but the guy that came up with it is already dead. The thing is that we never found out who it was, but Rob did send kind of like an SOS to somebody. It was kind of encoded, and I was like, we never found out who that was. I thought that's who got to Harry and Dante, but no, it was Enrique and Michelle's people, which we'll get to that in a second. But then Rob finds out at the heart of all this what this is all about. Enrique's getting his revenge, but there's also another person at play, and that's Michelle. She blames Rob because it's like, for one, it's like, right, I thought you were dead. The IED went off in that building. I didn't know you guys were still alive. And, it's like, right, she went through all that she went through. Because we don't know how long ago that was. Because obviously by the time we started the series, Rob was already on the outs with the CIA. So we don't know. But at the very least, when it's all said and done, Michelle understandably is pissed at the CIA, but her rage kind of goes towards Robin, because it's like, right, you were supposed to be my bishop. You were supposed to be my friend, best friend, in fact. You were supposed to have my back, and you didn't. It feels like you abandoned me. And it also cuts even deeper, because it's like, right, you still have your ties to the CIA. Yeah, you said you quit the CIA, which you did, but obviously, like, her still interacting enough with them to work with them. It's kind of like a mutual friendship, but it's like, yeah, it's still a thing of, I work for them because it benefits gets me, and sometimes I get dragged into it. And kind of got dragged into this situation because it's like maybe if she didn't have as large of the interaction she did with the CIA, specifically Fisk, then maybe things would be a little different. But because for Michelle, it's not like she's not the only one that survived it. Ed did as well, but the building collapsed, and it was enough for both of them to hold on to each other's hands. But the problem is there was kerosene on his side of the wall. It protected her, but he got burned alive because of that and died gruesomely. And Enrique found her, patched her up, and they've both been driven by their revenge. That's what this is all about. This is them going after the CIA. It's like the CIA's been allowed to operate callously as it has for so long because once again, as Mel said with Fisk, the CIA hasn't just done this once. It's not like Venezuela's only example. It's like they've been in that situation, and let's not because I'm sure it also flows into the whole let's kind of destabilize country thing. I'm sure that plays a part in why they decide to back who they decide to back type of situation. I think that has to be a considered part. But it's that's just how the CIA operates. I can't really do much about it because but it's you try to leave the system because the system refuses to change because this is the way it's always been. So that's why I've always been curious. Is that why Fisk takes such an interest in Robin? Because she is someone who fights against the system being what it is, wants it to be better, and isn't someone who she isn't willing to play ball in that capacity, whereas Fisk is. But I don't know, that's why I'm like, did he want to bring her in as a ringer to be able to help change the CIA? Or I mean, he recognizes her skill and sees her as useful, but I think her being an outsider to all this helps him out immensely, has done so multiple times. So I don't know. But it turns out Michelle plans on doing the same thing to Mel, Harry, and Dante that happened to Ed, because it's the only way I can hurt you is by hurting those close to you. That's why it's going to be really painful. Ultimately ending with her saying, right, I'm going to watch them die, and then I'm going to kill you. That's when I'm going to end your suffering and stuff. It will only be then, And it is just sad because Rob has always tried to do the right thing. And she's like, if I knew you were still alive, I would have come after. But that's the interesting thing. I guess it took them time to gather the intel they needed and kind of gather their forces. But because it's we're doing a pretty big thing here. We're going after the CIA. So we need to come after them, get the information we need. Because we don't fully know what Enrique's trying to get out of Fisk, but was about to give him they wanted to give him a second injection to try and because he's stubborn and being I can't tell you what I don't know. So, because the way Enrique made it sound oh, there was more that Fisk could have done. Maybe pulling out wasn't 100% on the CIA. Maybe they asked Fisk about it, and he's the one that kind of gave the okay to pull out. So it might have ultimately came down to his decision, and maybe that's what really sparked this. Why Enrique specific? Well, it's also because you were my friend, and you said all this stuff. You hyped me up. You said you had my back, and then you left me high and dry to the dictator that we were going up against. So that's motivation enough. But if he believes no, it was on Fisk whether or not to stick around, and he chose not to, then Fisk is kind of doubly screwed in that front. But kind of a super depressing way to that's why I had to look afterwards. I was I saw saying that this was going to be the season finale, but I'm there's no way, right? There's got to be one more episode. I was nope, this was in fact the season finale. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised. How did season 1 ended off on a stinger of oh, Delilah knows about Robin. Season 2 ended with Robin getting kidnapped. So it's kind of in a similar dire situation, but it's even worse because Mel, Harry, and Dante are literally about to be burned alive. So, and Robin's in a situation where it seems like she's screwed, like she's alone. It's how are you going to find your way out of this situation? Like I said, it seemed like she called in for backup, but I just don't know who she could have contacted. We'll ultimately have to wait to see when the show returns for season 4, which, yes, it was renewed for a 4th season. I looked this up because I didn't know this ahead of time, but apparently when they renewed the show for a 3rd season, they had already renewed it for a 4th one as well. So I was oh, interesting. So I'm excited to see. It'll probably be well, I was about to say, I would assume because I don't remember when this started. Didn't this start it's usually around fall when stuff like this. So I was about to say fall, but I'm I have no idea how much stuff is getting pushed back because of the writer's strike too. So that's a big thing to kind of consider. So this I could have sworn like this season started fairly late, didn't it? But I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah, the past two seasons started in October, so that trend probably would have continued with four, but like I said, that's most likely going to be pushed back because of the writer's strike. I mean, that also depends on how long the writer's strike goes on for, too, so, but I mean, either way, once again, it's back to that conversation of people deserve to be paid. Obviously, there's a lot of bigger parts to the writer's strike, but first and foremost, it's like hey, let people get paid the livable wages they need because of, like, there's a lot to it. Highly recommend, if you haven't read all there is to read about the writer's strike, you should hear from different people, especially people who are writers. I mean, a great place to kind of hear a lot of the breakdown of what that's about is on Fat Man Beyond with Kevin Smith and Mark Bernardin. Obviously, both coming from that place of both being writers, it's neat kind of getting their perspective on it, as well as you can just look online, especially on Twitter. Plenty of writers are talking about, everything. So, but like Mark Bernardin really breaks it down very succinctly on a more recent episode. A great place to start would be like the more recent episode 400. Mark kind of brings that conversation up at the top of the episode. So, just kind of breaking that down in case you want it. I figure like, it fits in this realm of things because it's also like why season 4 is going to end up being pushed back, but also it's a relevant conversation because obviously there's writers on this show too that, obviously like the conversation about network television and streaming, and I'm sure like even with this being a network television show, it's still that thing of, well, this also like airs on Paramount Plus afterwards, so that's part of that streaming. So it's all relevant to this show. I mean, even prevalently to this show. So I'm going on a whole tangent, but yeah, I just kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit. I probably should mention in that regard, especially when in this conversation of the show is probably going to be like pushed back. We don't know how long that's going to be. There's a lot of factors being considered, like the main one being the writer's strike. So yeah. But like I said, whenever we do get season 4, I'm excited to see where it goes. It's going to be quite a heavy season premiere, I'm sure, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see because you feel like it's like, okay, so is this going to be the overarching story? But it's like, nah, that season 3 stuff was like pretty quickly resolved. But I guess you made the argument with Fisk introduction in the show. It's kind of like, nah, that storyline kind of continued, but like where season 2 left off and where season 3 began, it was like that was kind of quickly resolved like at the beginning of the season. So I don't know if this is going to be in that same boat or not. Probably not, but we'll see. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good